Welcome back to Make a Ranch. Today we're starting off with a question from AJ Joshi, who's hit us up before with a question. So thank you, AJ. We always appreciate them. And for the rest of you, put your questions in the comment section below. We're always happy to get them and turn them into topics. But today's question is, how do you manage client expectations when it comes to a commission? So important. This was most important when I was starting off in architecture because the entire business was based on commissions. And each one of these commissions is tens of, not hundreds of thousands of dollars in terms of fees. So architecture is a commission-based business. And one of the things that I always heard when I got started was the client is always right. Not true. The client is always an opportunity, not always right. Even with difficult clients, you can still turn them into a good financial opportunity for yourself as long as you manage those expectations and set some professional boundaries to protect your time and your sanity. So we'll start with the obvious. Of course, you should have good communications, tell them a reasonable timeline, be upfront and transparent about what things are going to cost and what they could go wrong. The part I think that goes beyond the obvious there is really telling them what makes a successful client and have stories ready of previous clients that have gotten their own way. Now, you don't want to come across as defensive, like you're putting all the blame and the responsibility on someone that's paying you to do the work, right? So you need to outline where the rules of the partnership are. And in particular, when it comes to timing. So here's one way I used to do it. When someone would ask me, how long will it take you to design the house? And I'm like, well, let me tell you how long it took me to design my own house. It took me about a month. Now, when I design a house for a customer or a client, it typically takes me 6 to 8 months. Why do you think there's a difference? And they'll be like, I don't know what was happening. I'm like, it's decision making. I'm very comfortable making design decisions fast because I make a lot of them every single day. So when I'm designing for myself, there's still a few things I'm like, I don't know if I want this or this, but I get through them fast. Clients slow down process by taking time to design things. And often, if they're indecisive, they'll ask for another deliverable. They say, well, could we just see a rendering from another angle? Or could we see a rendering with this material option? Or I like this, but I don't know what it's going to cost. So I have to get the cost information first before I can make a decision about whether I want the fireplace here or over there, or whether I want bigger windows or smaller windows. So in some of those cases, it's about trust. They don't actually trust your expertise to forecast what the different things will cost. And so just because I told an architecture client that like, hey, I really think you should go with the smaller windows, even though we both agree that the bigger windows look better, but I've heard what your budget is. We haven't gotten cost information from the builder yet because we haven't finished the design, but I think these windows at that size are going to be out of your budget. And we're going to spend a lot of time implementing them, getting the structural engineering package around them, and then have to change them. And then we're going to be behind schedule and getting this all done in a timely manner. So there's been plenty of times where the client didn't trust that. They're like, well, I really just want to wait and see the bid because I really want those. That's a really key point that you need to address at that moment. You need to sort of acknowledge, not demand that they trust you, but saying, hey, I just want to note this. You want to wait until that. I'm saying this is going to be out of budget. So if we become behind schedule because we have to change the structural engineering package and all the drawings right at the moment after we've gotten the cost estimations, I want you to remember this time so that you don't create too much pressure because you didn't trust my best judgment. That's, I think, really important to note. So you're still giving in to the client. You're still allowing them to be right, but you're marking it and you're either documenting it through an email or through sort of a recaps if it was an in-person meeting. And it's not to create an I told you so, but if people see throughout a long process that you've been right more often than you've been wrong, that's how actually trust builds up. That's how they see that your judgment is a little ahead of theirs. And if they follow more of your lead, they'll get more of what they want. Now, the mistake I hear a lot of people make there is they do a leaning on their authority, or they'll say, I've been doing this for 15 years and I know that, these windows are too big for your budget. That works with some people, but it wears thin and you only get to use that so many times. In building the hotel, I saw a lot of conflict between some of my business partners and our general contractor where the general contractor was using that line way too often. Now, most of the time he was right, but he was wrong maybe like 15, 20% of the time. And so after he was wrong once, or his estimation was a little bit off, every time he relied on that again, he got shouted down saying, well, okay, your 20 years of experience didn't tell you that time when this thing was a little bit off that you suggested. So you don't want to just appeal to authority. You want to kind of frame it and say, hey, this is my best guess. There's a time and schedule consequence to moving away from that potentially. And let's just remember that so we can see who was the most accurate later on. And again, this isn't a war. You're not competing against the client to be more right. You're working with them. And I think where you really get a lot of repeat business from clients is when they see that you were patient with them even when you were right and they were wrong. And that second time you work with them is often way more efficient for all parties involved. The other challenging part about setting expectations is that it normally comes after you've landed the client. And when you're trying to land a client, you're often promising a lot because you're competing against other creatives out there. And so when you're competing, you tend to sort of narrow yourself or put yourself in a box, particularly when it comes to price. And so people will be like, okay, this design package is $50,000 of fees. How do we get that down? Because I really want most of the money to go to the house, not towards the design of the house. Reasonable, but short-sighted. And so you may be competing with an architecture firm or a design firm that is saying, hey, we're just going to take a stock house plan, modify it a little bit, show them our normal trim packages, and call it a day. So you might be competing with someone that intends on spending half the amount of time that you are. So I like sending hourly breakdowns. I set my hourly rate reasonable and say, hey, this is the amount of time that we think that each one of these things take. If you feel like we're spending too much time on this, then we need to decide right away that we're going to go with an off-the-shelf option, right? So for example, if the interior portions and the interior millwork and fit out is too many hours for the client's budget, I would say, okay, we can work around that, but you have to make a decision in writing ahead of time saying like, nope, we just want white cabinets, quartz countertops. This is the basic configuration. We're going to get 2 revisions and we're good to go. If not that, then I need to actually spend time figuring out what you want and that will actually work for the building. So I'll be flexible there. So as much as possible, I try to give them a really good estimate of what I expect. I also add to that because there's always things that go wrong. People change their mind, they get sick, a component that we designed around is no longer in stock, stuff like that. So I try to show them that my hourly rate, the amount of time I bill per hour, is reasonable. And then I try to forecast the amount of time that I think it's going to take. I listen to their arguments about shortening things or extending things, and then I tell them what I think might happen with them. And I'm like, you know what? We might show you 3 kitchen renderings that were allotted in this 30 hours of design time. You may not like them, or you may want to see a different option. And each additional rendering is going to take this much more additional time. So I make sure that the hourly estimate is tied to individual decision-making deliverables, renderings, floor plans, and stuff like that. The other part that's really important in setting expectations as it comes to time is budget. The tighter their budget is, the more time I need as a designer to make sure that it fits. And if they say, we have a really hard budget, but then they're asking for a square footage that's not feasible for that budget, I won't say yes to that until they get the square footage down. Or I'll say, hey, we're going to run out of time unless you make these absolute decisions that are within your very strict budget. So what I'm basically saying is I try to always avoid saying it's my way or the highway. That's not good client relationships. As much as possible, I try to forecast how I think they could go wrong as someone that doesn't go through, I'm a professional designer. They're not a professional client. So I try to use my experience in dealing with other clients and apply it to their situation. Over time, you start to realize that a lot of your clients make the same mistakes over and over and over again. And in your contractual structure, you want to build guardrails or bumper rails to kind of keep them on the path that makes everybody happy. Now, when it comes to physical design, I think samples are really important. And my favorite example of this is when it comes to flooring. People can look at little tiny swatches of flooring and be like, oh, I like this one. And they'll agonize and they'll hold them up this close to their eyes. That's not a good way of making decisions. What I try to do is have them pick general direction in terms of imagery. So it might be like, go on Pinterest and show me 3 examples of floors that you like. Then I try to figure out products that are close to them. But rather than get the small samples, I might order, 8 square feet of the flooring. Might be even 4 square feet could be enough, or it might even be like 32 square feet, like a whole sheet of plywood's worth of that flooring. And I lay them out in a space that has similar light, and I be like, okay, is this what you want? Is this what you're ready for? And I don't let them go stand and hold it to their face. No one stands with their face 6 inches above the floor. I make them stand like they're walking into the room, and this is what they see. I find that's a good way where it costs a little bit more to order that sample package as opposed to just a small sample that can be put in an envelope, but it's a great way of managing expectations. And they remember that as an event. Couples, when they come into your office and they hold up 2 samples, they don't remember the name. Oh, this was cotton white, and this was linen white, and this was sun bleached oak. No one's going to remember that, even if they take little photos and take notes of them. What they'll remember is if you have the framing of the house done, they walk into a space and they see a big sample of the flooring there. I find that locks the decision in a lot better than comparing 20 different things that are all just like subtle differences of each other. So I start with imagery that's of a similar room type and a similar view to what they're going to experience. And then I go with big sample swatch or layout. And then I try to make that a memorable moment where they make 3 or 4 key decisions on that day, take them out for lunch, make that a memorable event so they remember them signing off on it. If you're just emailing back and forth, you like this one versus this one, you got their input. So technically you kind of covered your behind technically in the communication flow. But for big decisions that have subjective consequences, I like to turn them into an event that's unforgettable so they remember where they were when they made that decision. And it's just easier to remind them, and it's easier for them to kind of not try to pretend or feign ignorance, being like, I don't remember approving that. I don't remember approving that. People forget emails all the time. They rarely forget in-person and physical events. The other important part of client expectations is value or cost. They're ultimately paying you, and they want to feel like they're getting value out of it. This is tricky because you want to make sure that your business is also profitable, but you don't want anyone feeling like they got ripped off. So I like to be really transparent here, and not transparent being like, oh, I'm going to show you all the receipts and all that stuff. I always offer those things. That's more of a good standard. What I try to be is say, hey, this option requires this much of my time. This option requires less of my time. This option has a lot of unpredictable things, meaning that if we go down this path, not only will it take more of my time, I'm not as sure as what the builder's quotes will come back for. I'm not even sure that the builder will agree to that. So I try to be really communicative about how there could be hidden landmines of uncertainty if we take a route that I'm not totally comfortable with. And then to be totally transparent is to speak about that in my own business language. So I'll say this happened with a client recently where they just wanted a very simple wood console. It was all made out of those Douglas fir beams that I use in a lot of my builds. And I said, okay, you want a very simple console. Here's what the materials will cost. Here's the best way I think to do the joinery that's really efficient for me. And it was just, some rabbets on them, a little bit of indentation, butt joints with just a little detail. And they're like, no, we want a mortise and tenon. I'm like, okay, mortise and tenon is going to cost you 3 times. The quote for just the simple console was $1,600. When they quoted the mortise and tenon, it was $3,800. And they're like, wait, it's the exact same material. Why is that much? I'm like, I could make a mistake on this one. I might have to buy extra material. In fact, I will have to buy extra material because material has to sit out to dry. So I have to anticipate that this could go wrong, or that the fit's not perfect, or that I get a knot or some sort of unforeseen consequence in the wood that makes this joint not really work and I got to start over. So I got to factor in that risk. And because I don't like risk, and because I'm already bidding you really efficient on what I want, this is what I have to do this. And what I was doing was I was trying to say, like, I'll give you what I want. You get to make the decision. But I very aggressively priced the thing that had uncertainty for me. Now, I don't want to price them both as best case scenarios if I know that one has a lot of landmines due to the subjective nature of the client's choice. So it's not trying to penalize them for going against me. It's trying to make them see all the doubt and indecisions that I am facing should they go with their choice versus my recommendation as someone that does this every day. And I always try to price them so that no matter which way they pick, I'm fine with either choice. Another really important consideration is to think about whether or not you are a service commodity or whether you're a unique creative that they're coming to for yourself. A lot of designers think that they're a unique artist or creative and the client only wants them. But if the client has shopped around to 5 or 6 other options and then ultimately decided with you, you are a commodity. If you've been comparison shopped, you are a commodity. Now, that's not a death sentence on your creative output. That is specific to the business relationship of how the client's thinking about you. And so when you're doing an initial sort of client interview, seeing if you're a good fit for each other, you should ask them, being like, oh, how are you making this decision on who to work with? What's important to you? And they might start with saying, oh, we just really like your portfolio. We really like the work you did with your previous clients, and that's the way we want you. And you're like, okay, that's really interesting. I appreciate that. That's good to know. But I would always ask them, how are you making this decision? Is it ultimately come down to cost? Is it ultimately about someone that you're the most confident will meet your budget? Is it you all about the sort of aesthetics and the stylistic tone that the designer is going to provide? You want to try to understand where their priorities are so that even if you're in that kind of creative commodity zone, you at least know what their expectation for that commodity is. Now, these days, I try to only take on clients that specifically want to work with me. I do not want to be competing with other creatives or fabricators or designers. It's someone that comes to me that isn't asking for me to do renderings or for them to be involved in the process. It's them giving me a rough dimension, a general sort of need of what they want, and then I produce the outcome and they like it because they want something from me. It's taken me a long time to get to that position where I can have that work. It's very hard to do that early on in your career, unless they just really like you or get along with you personally or just trust your taste implicitly. Now, when I get those commissions where they want specifically me, I don't charge them that much. I actually see that as an opportunity for me to be really time efficient, and I don't need to sort of double up my fees because I think I got them right where I want them, where they're going to leave me alone, let me do whatever I want. And because they like me so much, I'm also going to charge them a lot. Where I charge people a lot is where they don't give me that trust, where they're like, oh, we want approvals on this and this and this and this. So when I'm a commodity, I charge more. When I am a specific solution that they want from a creative match, I charge them less because it takes up less of my time. And I'm very honest and transparent about that. If you want to approve every step, if you want to approve samples, if you want to do those things, that's all time that it creates an administrative burden for me, and I'm going to charge you for it. But if you come to me and you give me a rough idea what you want and you trust me, I'm going to give you a fantastic deal. Now, this is a very different approach to how most artists work. They kind of use their specificity and their individual brand to keep driving the price higher and higher. And I'll do that sometimes if I'm selling a piece, like I feel very comfortable charging a lot for it. But if it's coming to a commission and I like the idea of doing the project and it's a project I want to do, I try to keep the rates reasonable if they're showing me a lot of trust and just want something specifically from me. All right, overrated, underrated, what do we got?
Let's hit it. Vaulted ceilings.
Vaulted ceilings in general just means any ceiling that's not flat. Now, there's some other people have some specific terms and stuff for it. I don't think vaulted matters. I think high versus low matters. Now, high is not always better. There's a lot of McMansions where the ceilings are too high and like you feel like you're in this cavernous space. In general, 8-foot ceilings are perfectly fine in some small bedrooms. Higher ceilings in common spaces and living rooms and kitchens can feel really nice. So high ceilings, ceiling height matters, but the shape, there's lots of good shapes for them.
Foyers or foyers.
There's no such thing as like a good room or a bad room. There's only a room that you use or you don't use, and that has a lot to do with lifestyle. Some people really like to have a formal entryway that like before you see the rest of the house. I don't really care. Like in my house, you walk in, you're right in the middle of the action. There's a little place to hang your coat, kick off your boots. That's about it. So that really depends on lifestyle. But in general, if I'm building a new house, I don't build a lot of massive houses these days. Put it this way, I would say these kind of formal, nice to have rooms, if you're building over 4 bedrooms, put some square footage towards them. If you're building under 4 bedrooms, like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, really start to think whether or not you need these formal spaces when you're already going to be a little tight on the number of bedrooms or closets and stuff like that.
Zaha Hadid.
It's funny thinking about Zaha because when I was in college, all the professors would trash her because they're like, oh, her stuff has no substance behind it. She's just doing really cool, flashy forms. It's very object driven. Her spaces aren't very sophisticated and stuff like that. Same thing was said about Frank Gehry a little bit before her. What's interesting is that happens over time is things that were crapped on by the critics then become popular amongst the young people tend to have longevity. Movies like The Matrix, it didn't get nominated for an Academy Award. It should have. Fight Club, one of the most important movies or influential movies of that thing, critics really crapped on it. They said it was terrible. So if something is really embraced by young people and the critics of its early days are really harsh, it has a good chance of having some longevity. Now, I'm not going to really weigh in on what I think of her work. Some of it was great. Some of it I was like, also, well, I don't really get it. But she kind of popularized, well, I don't know if she popularized any one movement or anything, but she did shapes that were very dramatic in forms that were unusual. And because of architects like Frank Gehry, the technology was developed to turn those into buildings. And here's the thing, people love novelty and things that are different stand out. And subtlety is often lost on the masses. So if you do big dramatic buildings that look like spaceships, people are going to pay attention to it. Now, the point, if you like Zaha, the architect / engineer that I think you should look at that came before her is Santiago Calatrava. Calatrava is a really interesting one, and I would say he is as important to Gehry to kind of doing really experimental shapes at the architectural scale.
Wow. Okay. The YouTube genre, 2 guys build secret underground mansion with pool and jungle using just 2 sticks.
Right, so these were like it was normally 2 guys working in sticks. Now, some of the early ones I think were real, but some of the later ones after they had gotten traction were faked. I see all of these as derivative and downstream of the really great YouTube channel, Primitive Technology. Primitive Technology, fantastic channel. One guy in the woods sort of building stuff up. Now, he kind of, I think in a lot of ways, pioneered the kind of time-lapse building with constraints. Just hands in the dirt, maybe a stick or 2, some rocks. I think what those early videos from Primitive Technology shows is that there's something universal and relatable, even without charisma or anyone talking to the camera or trying to do fancy hooks, of just watching competency in action. I love competency in action. And when it's sped up to our attention spans through time lapse, it's incredible. I've done probably way too much time lapsing of stuff over the years. But once it starts to get into these stunt builds where they're cutting corners and there's really an excavator off site, I feel like it's jumped the shark and it's a race to the end. And now there's probably AI versions of all of this that's just as authentic as the kind of faked versions. So what that means as a genre now is that you actually have to establish authenticity in that one person going out into the wilderness or a small group of people. And I still think there's a lot of room for that. One of my favorite cooking channels on Instagram is Man with Pot or Men with Pot. And it's the food version of that. And I think there's something really relaxing and reassuring about someone going out into the wilderness with a minimal amount of gear and just doing stuff. Outdoor Boys, another great example of that. So I still think that kind of like primitive exploration stuff is really appealing. And there's always kind of interest in those types of things if they're done well. Even in literary form, one of my favorite books growing up was My Side of the Mountains, which was basically a book version of Primitive Technology.
Farmers markets.
Farmers markets are interesting because they've become chic in certain areas. Now, growing up, farmers markets were kind of a low-cost, kind of hippie, crunchy way to get like food. Now, I came sort of disillusioned with farmers market when I was in Boston because there was this kind of farmers market-ish thing that really wasn't a farmers market. It was more like a discount, like a Ross Dress for Less, of like food that had kind of gotten rejected by produce buyers and that was all sold really cheap in this big downtown area of Boston. And it wasn't great quality, but they kind of like sometimes would dress it up a little bit to give it farmers market vibes. The farmers market in Santa Barbara is one of my all-time favorites. It's a beautiful farmers market. There's legitimately cool farms and honey and avocado purveyors, not to mention kind of like pre-made foods like jams and jellies. And it's in downtown. It's pedestrian friendly. You're surrounded by bars and restaurants. It's a phenomenal experience, but it's also really expensive. I think what's interesting to me is that farmers market in my mind has moved from low end to high end. And you even see the most expensive grocery stores trying to copy aspects of farmers markets. Erewhon and Whole Foods before them were trying to kind of create the illusion of farmers market type vibes, even though they were, chains of basically medium to big box stores.
We talked about bars last week, rooftop bars.
Rooftop bars are probably a little bit overdone. Now, it's always nice to be on a rooftop. It's always nice to have a good view of the city. But it feels like even so many mid hotels have like rooftop bars with like the fake gas fire pits and those like weird propane heaters and the same furniture. It's fine. It's just not really special, right? Like I think library or really good lobby bars are kind of underrated, right? The ones with the authentic wood paneling. Heck, I think there's a lot of great sort of bar experiences that could be had and rooftops have just become too plentiful, especially for new builds. So they could be awesome, but I feel like rooftop bars are better. I kind of think of it like tree houses. Having beers on the roof of a building that you're not supposed to be on, amazing experience. Having rooftop beers on an Atlanta Hyatt roof deck feels pretty mid. It feels like, all right, let's get the polyester polo shirts out and the athleisure and the Allbirds and like drink some mediocre IPAs. Not that incredible of an experience.
Boom, roasted.
I would say these days you probably could do more with a basement bar and call it a speakeasy than you could with a mediocre rooftop bar.
Okay, potentially contentious. Adobe.
Adobe, the software company, not to be confused with the bricks. Look, they've been around for a long time. They're tools a lot of people use. Now, I hear a lot of complaints about them chasing the price or changing the prices on people unexpectedly. I hear a lot of people complaining about the subscription model. I've never minded the subscription model. I actually really preferred it. I found that when I bought the software, I was too slow to update, particularly amongst like where I was working with a lot of freelancers. Everyone had different versions that could create issues. There was extra emails being sent. So with how much I use the software, I feel the subscription is perfectly priced. Like I think it's a great deal. Now, I think their subscription pricing is great for someone that makes money off of the software, but I think it probably is a barrier to entry compared to some of the Figmas and Canvas and stuff like that that's out there for getting the next generation of designer. So as an established professional that knows how to use the software, I think it's very fairly priced and I like using it. I've found them to be pretty reasonable. But I think the question would be is what works for me in my 40s, is that prohibiting them from getting the next generation of young creatives using their software? Fair question. Don't know.
Flow state.
I feel like flow state is one of those terms that I don't really know what it means and everyone uses it and then they'll cite like some professional athlete talking about it and then like someone will have like a faux science podcast where they talk about how to get into flow state and they'll talk a little bit about brain waves and you're like, is this even any of it real? Look, there's some days where it feels like everything's working, some days it's not. I have no idea what that is. It could be emotional state, it could be you got a good night's sleep, it could be that your stomach's feeling good because you ate healthy the last 2 days. I don't know. Some days are more productive than others. Sometimes you think clearer and sharper. Some mornings you wake up and you feel foggy even after 3 cups of coffee. I don't know. People like to say these things, and I find that the most effective people just focus on what they need to do and not their own internal state. Like, if the more I'm thinking about how I feel instead of what I should be doing, I feel like the less productive I am. I focus on the work. not on myself. And I tend to get the most work done when I do just that. I feel like people that talk about flow state are also people that say like, oh, my blood sugar's low, instead of saying I'm hungry. Like, it's this level of focus on something that they heard once, but maybe they understand it, but it's like, you're not a nutritionist. And it's like, you didn't measure it. Even if you have one of those stupid little monitors stuck to your arm, like, stop. It's like, it's almost a type of scientific pretentiousness, being like, oh, this is what I do to get into a flow state. And it's like, my blood sugar is really low, so I need to have like a little bit of Gatorade or maybe an orange. It's just like, it can just be simple. No one cares except you. And you probably don't even know what you're talking about. So if you're hungry, eat something. If you're thirsty, drink something. If you're tired, take a nap, get some rest. If you're not feeling very sharp, focus on your health, right? Or reduce distractions, put your phone down. But when I hear a lot of people start talking about their flow state and their blood sugar and all these things, I just think of, it makes me kind of think that, or it doesn't make me think that. It makes me suspicious that they might be a little self-involved.
Architectural Digest.
Architectural Digest is not really something that most architects I know pay attention to. Architectural Digest is about interior design more than it is architecture. It is about style and consumer taste, mostly aimed at rich people. It's not about architecture itself. You know that because it's rarely floor plans or building details in it. Architectural Record, Architecture, Detail Magazine, those are all architectural publications. So I've never paid too much attention to Architectural Digest, other than sometimes they have like really good YouTube home tours that are kind of fun. But it's really a interior design magazine that's focused on the elite.
Electric rideables.
So e-bikes, e-scooters, all these things, like, I guess they can be good. Like, I'm sure there's people that use them efficiently. I think for like the messenger community, they could be nice. I don't know. Like, I tend to think that they create a lot of waste. I remember like when Lime scooters were big and I was in downtown LA, and there was just these Lime scooters everywhere, and it seemed like drunk people would kind of play around on them. Homeless people would kind of destroy them. I don't know, I just feel like they kind of littered up everything. Now, I've ridden some e-bikes that are amazing, and I was looking at the Rivian e-bikes. It looks incredible. I guess there's like great applications for those, particularly if like the community is kind of friendly for them. I know I was in San Clemente, and a lot of people just like go out to dinner in a golf cart. That's kind of awesome. I guess they do that a lot in Florida too. So I love the idea of smaller electric vehicles for getting around, but they're very site specific. Now out here in the desert, I think I would be interested in an electric motorcycle or some sort of electric off-road vehicle, like an ATV electric version. I was interested in the company Cake. Cake, they did make really cool e-bikes. I think they might have gone under or gotten purchased by someone else, but they were working on a very futuristic looking electric ATV that I thought was phenomenal and very interested in getting. But what I am most excited about is electric excavation equipment. I want the electric skid steer. I want the electric bulldozer. I want the electric backhoe. That's what I want, is electric vehicles that can do real serious hard work. Not toys, not more bikes, not e-foils, not electric paddle boards. I want electric machines that do real work.
Investigative journalism.
Investigative journalism is interesting. I think it's only as interesting as what you're investigating. And, it's an expensive type of content creation. My friend Yoonj has been doing some investigative reporting on things like data centers and mines that were inactive that are now active again in California, and kind of getting the community perspective and just showcasing on her YouTube channel. We'll put a link to it down there, what's kind of going on with these projects. I think that's really important, but it's also, I know Yoonj and I trust her that she's coming at it authentically. If I didn't know her, then I might look at this and being like, okay, well, what's behind this? Was there already a conclusion formed? I don't think there is a thing as unbiased journalism. I think that can just get thrown out. I think there's only bias that we accept, and biases that we think are fair, and biases that we think are offensive or too much. People are not unbiased. No one goes through life in neutral mode, completely evaluating everything 50-50, and also things aren't split 50-50. So I think investigative journalism can be great, but I think the consumer expectation that anything is unbiased is misguided. I think it should only be done well. Is this reasonably truthful and fair? Nothing is going to be devoid of mistakes. No documentary is perfect. Even eyewitness testimony is not that reliable sometimes. So, I would say it's a valuable thing when it happens, but I think people's expectation is that when they like something, they think it's unbiased. And when they dislike something, they shriek about the bias when it's always biased.
Last one, big one. Starting a YouTube channel.
Starting a YouTube channel is underrated for how valuable it can be, but overrated for how easy it is. It's hard because you're competing not just for attention. Like, you can blow up quickly on TikTok or Instagram. And I'm sure there's people that have done it on YouTube, but a lot of them that I know that have done it, they've done it with shorts, not long format stuff. There's always exceptions. It's really valuable to capture someone's attention. And I'll compare this to sort of books. If you can make a very popular 30 to 40 minute long YouTube video that 100,000 people watch, that's incredible, right? That's closer to watching or reading a book than it is to looking at a picture, right? It's a lot of people have created Instagram or TikTok videos that 100,000 people or 1 million people have seen. Not as many people have created a long format YouTube video that 1 million people have seen. So, but it's also a lot more work, and the promotional infrastructure is totally different. And I would say it's not that making one video that's great is so hard or so impossible. It's just that you just don't know if it's working or not. And so you have to make, often in most cases, 20 to 30 videos to figure out what works. And so making 20 to 30 long format videos is a lot of work. And then eventually you find one. But by the time you discover what worked, the landscape may have changed. Or so be prepared to not have it succeed, not get great feedback back right away. So it's a slog. I know so many people, put this way, I know way more people that have transitioned from doing well on YouTube into doing well on Instagram and TikTok than the other way around. Thanks for watching Make a Ranch. Give us your questions and your topic ideas down below, and we'll see you next time. Bye.